Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Summer Tomato Live. Thanks for tuning in. So Summer Tomato Live is an interactive online classroom where we'll be answering your most pressing food and health questions, no matter how big or small. I'm your host, Daria Pino, and the creator of the website summertomato.com, where you can find all my favorite healthy eating tips for food lovers. So to participate in the show, you're going to have to, in the future, you're going to sign up at the URL at the bottom of the screen, which is tinyletter.com/summertomato, and that will give you access to future live shows as well as the Tomato Slice newsletter that'll give you the ability to vote on show topics, ask questions in advance via email, and get even more of your personal health questions answered. So I'm going to be interacting a lot with the people in the newsletter, and I'd love for you to participate there. Also, I'm really excited to announce that I've partnered with Foodsy and Zursun Heirloom Beans to provide the first 150 subscribers with, the first 150 subscribers with a free sample of Zursun cranberry beans, which is great for anybody who's actually doing the slow-carb diet, as well as to get a chance to get a free Foodsy tasting box. The Foodsy tasting boxes are amazing. If you don't know about them, I have a link in the show notes at the bottom of the blog post. You can check it out there. Basically, it's a $20 value. They send you all the awesome stuff that Foodsy is sampling out that month, and it's a really, really, really cool gift, and I'm really psyched that they're sponsoring. So thank you, Foodsy. Thank you, Zursun, and it's great. So this week, for the first episode, which is available to everyone, by popular demand, we are discussing the new best-selling book by Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Body. And so basically what I'm going to be doing is giving you a quick breakdown of the book and highlighting my favorite and least favorite parts, and then I'll take your questions live at the end. So, I already prepared a lot of this beforehand. So in the show notes, you'll be able to see at the bottom of the blog post a lot of the links that will be helpful that I'll be mentioning in the show. Sweet. So the 4-Hour Body. So first, I want to start by just saying that as many of you know, I'm actually friends with Tim Ferriss, and I'm a huge fan of the 4-Hour Work Week. And but I want you to know that he has nothing to do with the show, and all these opinions are my own, and they're not influenced by Tim or anyone else. So I just wanted to get that out of the way from the beginning. So basically, I'll just give you a brief rundown of what the 4-Hour Body is. So basically, the 4-Hour Body is a guide to rapid body change, which is what he calls. So basically, rapid fat loss. He talks about muscle gain. He talks about better sex, better sleep, etc. And the information he gives is produced largely by self-experimentation. So basically, experiments he's done on himself. Although he does reference some science, some peer-reviewed articles, etc., most of it's based on his own experience. I'll just say from the get-go that I do think the book is worth reading, especially if you're like a sort of fitness, health geek like I am, and I'm sure many of you are. Basically because it's like a really just interesting and unique perspective on health and body hacking. And I also think it's a really great example of how to go about finding your own personal health style. He does a lot of testing, which is really important if you're going to be doing if you're going to be finding out what works for you, so you get your own profiles done, you do your own testing. And I think Tim's a great example of somebody who has really mastered the art of figuring out what works best for him. It's also really entertaining. He's a fantastic writer. If you haven't read The 4-Hour Work Week, it's also great. So basically, yeah, I think the book is worth reading, and worth getting into, even if you're not going to follow the diet per se, like I would not. But I'll get to that in a second. Awesome. So basically, I'm going to start by giving my impressions of the book. And if you have any questions as I'm talking, please go ahead and submit them using that little red button in the corner saying "Ask a Question." And you can either ask a text question, or you can call in and chat with me about a topic via video. And that would be awesome. If you do that, make sure you have some earbuds like these, so that there's no feedback, because that's bad. Great, and I'll just take questions when I'm done. All right, so let's talk. I know a lot of people haven't actually read the book yet, so I'll just start by giving you a brief overview of what it is. And again, there's a note, link to the blog post about this also in the show notes below this post. So basically, the 4-hour body revolves around this diet, this dietary pattern that Tim calls the slow-carb diet. Great name. Yeah, it's wonderfully great name. So basically what the slow-carb diet is just to give you an overview, is there's 5 rules. And so basically 6 days a week, you are supposed to avoid what he calls white carbs. And this includes bread, rice, noodles, cereal, any kind of batter, sugar, potatoes, your standard sort of like Atkins exclusions. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 on the slow carb diet is to eat the same meals over and over again. And basically what those meals consist of is a protein, some sort of bean or lentil, which he calls legumes, and vegetables. And so all your meals should include those 3 things. Rule number 3 is don't drink your calories. And rule number 4 is don't eat fruit, which he added, by the way, this is what the book looks like. He added it in the book. So in the blog post that he wrote about this slow-carb diet in 2007, does not include don't eat fruit. And he talks in the book that he just got more data and just realized that it was better to include that rule. And the final rule is that there's 1 cheat day a week. So like I said, 6 days a week, these are the rules you're supposed to follow. But then on the 7th day, you rest. And on the cheat day, you basically are not only allowed, but required to sort of binge and gorge yourself on any food you want. No foods are off limits on day 7, and you're encouraged to sort of, sow your wild oats and eat as much junk food and whatnot as you can get your hands on. So that's the basic tenet of, people love, I'm reading the chat, people love day 7. Yeah, I bet. So those are the basic tenets of the slow-carb diet. But there are a couple corollaries that once you get into the book, you realize that there's a few more rules. So I'm just going to go into those as well. So one of his basic principles is that you're supposed to eat breakfast within 1 hour of waking, preferably within 30 minutes, and that you should eat a minimum of 30 grams of protein. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but he says that is very effective for fat loss. Another corollary is that you can't eat dairy on the slow food diet. The only exception is cottage cheese, and he says if you have to. The third corollary is that he says there should be no snacking. And the reason for that is that you're supposed to eat until you're full in the meal, and so you shouldn't be hungry again for several hours, and then it's time to eat another meal. If you are getting to the point where you need snacks, you should be eating more. You're not eating enough during the meals. And sort of along the snacking, regarding snacking, he also says to avoid what he calls domino foods. And even though these are technically okay on the diet, he said people tend to overeat them. And so if you are one of those people, you should avoid them. And his domino foods include nuts, chickpeas, hummus, and then he says peanuts and macadamias, which are also nuts, obviously. And basically the reason for this is it's really, really easy to eat way too many of them. And a lot of people, if they plateau, they realize if they cut these foods out, they'll start losing weight again. Another corollary of the diet is that he says you should limit artificial sweeteners, and you should drink lots of water. He emphasizes sticking to grass-fed, sort of hormone-free beef and pork and other higher mammals when you eat them. He also has an entire chapter on what he calls sort of damage control. So these are for your binge days, how to make it so that you don't gain fat on the binge days as much as, you don't do as much damage as you can. So those are damage control. And then he also has a bunch of crazy stuff in there that's sort of like a corollary to the diet. So, he says you can start with the diet with those basic 5 rules and you'll be fine. But he also has a bunch of crazy stuff in there about supplements, like tons and tons and tons of supplements. And also he does nutty stuff like take ice baths to maximize fat loss. And he also includes a lot of information on minimalist workouts, which are pretty cool, like exercises that you're only supposed to do a couple days a week, and are supposed to be very, very effective. So that's what the diet is. The book has a lot more than that, though. So, one of the reasons I like the book is that, there's a whole chapter on sleep. I'm someone who's always had insomnia my whole life. I'm dying to try some of the stuff he talks about in the book. On that front, the sex chapters are fascinating. I mean, it's worth buying just for those. And then there's all sorts of fertility. If you have fertility issues, if you're having trouble, getting pregnant or getting your wife pregnant and you want help with that, he has like extensive information on that as well. So it's a really interesting book. It's kind of like a cookbook for your body, for body hacking. And but that's the basic of the slow carb diet. So I'll give you my impression, sort of what I came away with after reading the book, before I start taking questions from you guys. So the questions I get are always very, I get when people ask me about this book. The reason we're talking about this today is because people ask me about this book all the time. And what people always want to know is, how bad is fruit? How bad is this? Is this bad for you? Tim says I shouldn't eat it. And I just want to emphasize, and Tim would also emphasize this, that this diet is designed to induce rapid fat loss. Like, he's very clear about that. This is not a diet to be healthy. This is to lose 20 pounds in 30 days. So, when he says not to eat fruits and not to eat grains, it's not that they're bad for you. They'll just make it harder to lose a bunch of fat, and it'll slow your weight loss progress. That being said, Tim is really excellent at selling books, if you haven't noticed, and he knows that fat loss sells, which is why he emphasizes it in the diet. But interestingly, and if you read all like 550 pages of this monster book, he waits to the very end, like literally like the third to the last page 546, I wrote it down, before he says the real goal of the diet. And this is so fascinating to me. He says, and I quote, "My general guideline, what I refer to as Darwin's rule, is simple. Eat for optimal fertility and everything else falls into place." So it's not like he's completely disregarding health or anything else. I think that he just focuses on fat loss because he knows that, that's the sort of stuff that sells books. The fact that he focuses on fertility is really, really interesting to me, that he thinks that's the most important thing. And in retrospect, after reading the book, there's so many chapters on testosterone and fertility and hormone balances that he seems a little bit obsessed with it. So, I mean, it's an interesting approach to a diet optimized for fertility. I haven't looked into it enough that I would say that's a bad idea, but it's different for sure. And, it's slightly different than my approach, which is generally to just eat for health. And then the rest will fall into place. So, so the diet's not about health per se. So that's why it's very strict. It's designed to induce weight loss. So my second point that I want to make is that I'm sure the diet works. And what I mean by works is that pretty much all diets work for a little while. I mean, even if you're doing if you look at diet studies, which I've looked at a few, almost inevitably the control group loses weight. And the control group is the ones who are instructed to not change their diet. They just start writing food down, but just the mere fact of people knowing that they're being watched and they're paying more attention to what they're eating, they know they're part of a diet experiment, almost everyone will lose weight. That's why food journaling is so effective. So, in that sense, I'm sure it works for a short time. Any diet will work for a short time. The Twinkie diet works. Every diet works. And Tim, personally is really rigorous about testing, and he knows how to get results. So I'm sure that anybody who's doing the diet is, having success with it. But the questions for me are a little bit more complicated than that. I want to know how long people lose weight and keep it off. Do they keep it off? Or, do you lose your 20 pounds and gain it right back like every other diet on the planet? And also, you don't just want results, you want the right results. Do you just want to lose fat, or do you want to not have a heart attack? I mean, not that these are different goals, or not that these are mutually exclusive, but I think it's important to distinguish in your mind what your real goals are. And if it's just to lose fat, it's kind of, it gets a little tricky. Losing fat is easy. I don't think that's the hard part. I think being healthy over the long term should be the real goal. So I'm not really sold on those points about the book. Okay, so the next point I wanted to make is that 6 days a week, the diet is actually really, really similar to how I eat, which, some people are sort of surprised to hear. I am thrilled that Tim spent so much time talking about the wonders of beans and lentils as the cornerstone of his diet. I think that's awesome. I've been trying to get people to eat beans for years, and most people are just like, yeah, whatever, crazy girl. That makes me stink. I'm not going to do that. But now they're popular. Everybody's on the slow-carb diet. Everybody's eating beans, and I love it. It's amazing. It makes me really, really happy. So that's rad. So in that sense, it's really similar to my diet. I generally eat fairly low carb, but I'll just explain what the differences are between my diet and his 6 days a week diet. So I do eat fruit, and you can't eat fruit on the slow carb diet. I do eat intact grains and occasionally processed grains, but especially intact grains. I don't limit that in my diet at all. I think they're healthy. Also, he emphasizes having a very, very minimalist diet. He says you should eat the same meals over and over again and reduce variety as much as possible. I don't think that's, he says that that's because the people who are the most successful dieting do that, which is true. However, I don't think that's the best thing you can do for health. And that's because there's a lot of different vitamins and a lot of different important foods or important nutrients in all the different foods you eat. And the best way to make sure all your bases are covered, way more effective than taking supplements, is to eat a varied diet. So I emphasize variety in my diet. And I think everyone should, and it makes me sad that he emphasizes minimalism, even if it is more effective for weight loss. Also, I eat a lot less protein than he recommends, partially because I've found that it doesn't help me. I don't feel as good, but I'm, as you might imagine, a lot smaller than Tim Ferriss, so that might explain that. And another main difference is that, so I also have cheats on my diet. I'll eat, if I want a cupcake at a birthday party, I'll eat a cupcake at a birthday party. The difference is that my cheat days or cheat meals, I don't have cheat days. That's I'll talk about that in a minute. But I have, treats. I'll treat myself sometimes, and those are at the times of my choosing. In Tim's diet, you can only do that on Saturdays, and or whatever day you choose to be your cheat day. And I have a little more leeway for myself. So that's how my diet is different from the 6 day a week diet. But to be fair, I'm me. I'm also starting at a much lower body fat, and I'm not trying to lose weight. So I'm starting at a much lower body fat than he even suggests as a target. So I don't even know if he would suggest his diet for me. Probably not. So and everybody's different. But and then of course, which is my next point, is the binge days are something that I don't do at all. So actually before. Yeah, okay, let's talk about binge days. I'll skip around a little bit. So binge days, so this is the day 7 on the diet when you can eat whatever you want. As you can imagine, this makes me cringe. He says that the reason you should binge, you have to binge, is that if you eat low carb for too long, your body will downregulate all these metabolic processes, and your metabolism will slow. And so he says you need to spike up your insulin, spike up your calorie intake once a week to keep your processing, keep your metabolism processing in full swing. It makes sense in theory. I guess it works. I mean, according to him and his data in his book, it works. I would rather spread out that over the week. So, I just don't get that. And the other thing that really bothers me about binge days is that he permits all junk food. And there's no part of me that thinks it's okay to eat a Snickers bar. And that's not to say that I don't think there's a place, like I said, for cake and ice cream. But, reading the 4-Hour Body, what was really interesting to me is Tim a couple times mentions some places around here in San Francisco, like he mentions Buy Right ice cream and some pastry shops I don't know of. And I don't really consider those junk food. I mean, these are artisan producers that use amazingly local, high-quality ingredients. So I don't think these go, they're treats for sure, but I wouldn't call them junk food. And for me, there's a huge difference between eating Buy Right ice cream, which is like the most amazing sugar experience of your life, and something like a Snickers bar. So that's a gripe I have with the binge days. Right. So, people ask me how I feel about binge days. You can eat your fruit and grains on binge days. I guess that's good. I guess that's what I would do if I was on it. But I'm not okay with eating high fructose corn syrup and all those weird chemicals that are in most industrial processed foods. Like, you couldn't pay me enough to eat a Pringle, I wouldn't do it. I don't even know what those things are. So I love pizza. So somebody just, as I say, we eat great pizza here in San Francisco. I just don't eat Domino's pizza. Does that make sense? If you ever come to San Francisco, ask me and Kevin about pizza. Okay, so now I want to move on. So binge days they're not my favorite part of the diet, but they're not my biggest problem with the diet. And I'm saving this for sort of the middle here. My biggest gripe with the diet, and I'm going to quote, this is a quote from the book, "This diet is not meant to be fun, it's meant to be effective." And he says this probably 10 times. And, my first impression when I read that was just like, screw that. Like, it really, I don't want to live in a world where 6 days a week I can't have fun eating. Eating is too awesome. It's too much of an important part of my life. I enjoy it, thoroughly. And he says that people do end up enjoying the diet. But to me, if you can if you can only eat birthday cake on Saturdays, you're making tremendous sacrifices in your social life, and I just don't think it's necessary. So, and what kills me about that he does this in the book is, I don't know, for those of you who've read The 4-Hour Workweek, I mean, it seems to me like the exact opposite of his philosophy in that book. So in The 4-Hour Workweek, I know it sounds scammy, so does The 4-Hour Body, but it's not. It's actually an excellent book. It helped me get my PhD while simultaneously building a website and a whole writing career. I mean, it's a fantastic book. I mean, the whole point of it is that you shouldn't postpone your life and the enjoyment you get out of life and the things that you want to do in life to when you're 70 and retire. That you should make time for those things now. That the biggest commodity you have is time, and that you should try to free up of it as much as possible to do things that you love. And then what's funny is he actually uses the same terminology. He says he calls what a normal retirement plan thing as the deferred life plan, and he says this is horrible. You shouldn't do it. You should have mini retirements. And in The 4-Hour Body, he actually recommends the deferred eating plan. He was like, you just should write down all the things you want to eat when you can't, and then just have them on your cheat day. And so, I know maybe he thinks that it's not deferring it that bad if it's only 1 week away, but I think it is. I think that making those sort of sacrifices day to day is a little bit sad. I mean, I like to be able to choose when I eat, something that's not necessarily the healthiest thing, and just find that balance for myself. That being said, pretty sure I know why he does it this way, and that's because it's easier. I mean, it's easier to just follow a set of rules. I mean, if you're teaching people to be on a diet, if you want to create a diet that people will lose weight on, very effectively, creating a bunch of really strict rules is the best way to do it. But, that doesn't necessarily mean that I agree that it's okay to eat foods that you don't enjoy, or that you have a diet that isn't meant to be fun. It's meant to be effective 6 days a week out of your life. So that is my biggest gripe with the book, and that just sort of makes me sad. But what are you gonna do? So, and it also brings me to another point that I wanted to bring up, which is he never in this book, he has his diet and he has his plan, but he never really talks about maintenance. So it's unclear to me what you're supposed to do when you reach your target weight. So okay, you lose 20 pounds in 30 days, hurrah, you're Superman. what are you supposed to do now? Are you supposed to stay on the diet and just hope you stop losing weight when you're supposed to? Are you supposed to do the diet less stringently? Are you supposed to go off the diet completely and just gain all your weight back? I really don't know. And it's sort of, I think it's a little bit obnoxious that you sort of get left hanging there like that. It's not clear at all how you're supposed to eat after the diet. So, that's unfortunate, and I wish there was more of an answer to that. Another thing that that bothered me a little bit about it was that he really de-emphasizes cooking and the value of sort of fresh, whole foods. He does this partially to keep people from bailing on the diet. 100%. He does this 100% to keep people from, trying to do too many changes at once, trying to make it too hard by forcing people who would normally never cook, cooking all the time. He doesn't want that to be a barrier. So he's like all about the canned beans and the frozen vegetables, and I think that's fine, and it goes along with this diet is meant to be effective and not fun. But I think that there is something tremendous to say about food that tastes good. And and I hope that you guys sign up for the newsletter so you can try these beans from Zursun. These are heirloom organic beans. The first time I ate beans like this, it changed my life. Like I didn't think I liked beans or whatever. I didn't care. They're beans. Like I always just had like either black beans or kidney beans out of a can. When you like have fresh beans and you soak them for a few hours and then you cook them with some onions and some beef broth and it's amazing. And you're like, the juice is good, the broth is good. You're like, how did I live my whole life without these amazing beans? I even have them on my earrings. To me, that's the best way to stick to a diet, is if the food tastes amazing. And guess what? Like, broccoli from the grocery store tastes like ass, but like at my farmer's market, it's sweet and delicious and wonderful. And people that vegetables you think you don't like turn out to be amazing if you buy them from somebody who cares and cook them at home. So I think that he missed an opportunity there to encourage people to try that out if they can. But I understand why he did it, because it is hard. It's a hard life adjustment for people to make, to start cooking regularly. But I think people should at least try it. It's pretty remarkable. But this is partially too because it fits his lifestyle. I know he doesn't cook, and him and I have talked about this before. I tried to get him to start at least not eating canned lentils, because lentils only take like 15 minutes to cook on the stove, but I couldn't do it. So so that bothered me a little bit. There are one thing he did really awesome though, and this was fantastic. I loved it. Was that he has a great discussion of vegetarian and vegan diets. Probably one of the best I've ever read, because he discusses and he does a really good job of being honest about how it is possible to be healthy vegetarian, and he gives you step-by-step instructions on what you need to do to be healthy if you're going to do vegetarian and vegan. He gives examples of people in the slow carb style that do it vegetarian and vegan. So if you are, there's a plan for you in there. Not only that, these some of the examples he gives are like, one of the guy was like this muscle building bodybuilder guy who's been really successful. Another person was an endurance athlete who was a vegan, was really successful. And then another example was someone who was an omnivore and just trying veganism for a month. And I think, he does a fantastic job of explaining, why these are good why these can be healthy diet plans, but also the dangers and the risks involved and how much harder it is to be healthy and to get a full complement of everything you need if you are vegetarian or vegan. So, that chapter is great. And I think all vegetarians and vegans should read it. It's actually 2 chapters. For some reason, it's in the footnote, it's in like the appendices, but it's a solid 2 chapters. And hats off to him for doing that, because he does it really well. What else? So another thing that he talks about quite a bit in the book is the use of drugs and supplements. And I really have a hard time commenting on this. I don't recommend supplements. I definitely don't recommend drugs. Apparently, they're effective for some people. He presents some very interesting data. that, about the effectiveness of some of these regimens. He also does a good job of describing the dangers of some of the regimens as well. So, I don't think he's irresponsible in recommending the supplements the way he does. I just personally am not, I worry about any unnatural dosage of certain nutrients, and I'm also wary of the effectiveness of supplements for like long-term health, because a lot of studies just basically show that no matter how promising they are, they just don't pan out. So, some people have asked me about how I feel about the supplements. Personally, all I take is a multivitamin and some vitamin D, because I got my vitamin D tested and it was really low, which is not surprising because I live in San Francisco and it's freezing here year-round. So, what he recommends really is actually getting tested, and so you know what you need and what you're missing. And in that case, I agree. Like, it's good to find a way to get those numbers back up. But generally, I'd rather do it with whole foods and not with supplements. So that's my take on the supplements. So in addition to the diet, he also has like an extensive workout program. But they're fairly minimalist exercises, and I have to say that the exercise part of this book is awesome. I totally want to get a kettlebell. These things sound amazing. The 6-minute ab chapter is phenomenal. Like, abs have always been like one of my strong points. Like, we all have strengths and weaknesses. Abs have always been pretty easy for me. I was so sore after doing this diet, or not the diet, after doing his 6-minute ab exercise. I haven't been sore like that in years. So that's awesome. Props to Tim on that. But he sometimes takes it a little crazy. So at one point he mentions, like, after you eat, like, going into the bathroom and doing squats in a stall. Like, and I've gone to dinner with him before, and he actually left at some point right after the meal. He's like, "Oh, I'll be right back." And I'm like, I know he's in the bathroom, like, doing squats right now. It's pretty crazy. I think that's a little nuts for me. I don't know what to say, but if you're comfortable going to a restaurant and doing squats in the bathroom, have fun with that. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I also think the chapter on sex is awesome, and the sleep advice is awesome. And let's see, so that's basically it. There's a couple other just little tidbits that I wanted to mention, because the book's sort of all over the place. But one thing that he starts talking about early on is something that is really cool, and I'm glad he does this. He talks about something called the minimal effective dose, which is basically like, don't overkill anything. Like, if you only need a little bit to get the effect, why do 10 times more than that? Like, why go to, like, one of his examples is, why go to the gym 6 days a week when you can go twice and get even better results? I think that's a really good chapter to read. I think everyone should read it. I mean, I think as Americans, generally, we tend to think more is better, and he does a really, really good job of arguing that that's total crap. So great discussion of the minimal effective dose. Everybody should read that. I also do like that, despite the fact that he talks about junk food sometimes, and despite the fact that he doesn't really emphasize cooking, he does emphasize a mostly whole natural foods approach, which I really appreciate. He recommends sticking with grass-fed beef, for example, because of the weird hormones and stuff that's in feedlot beef, and toxins and whatnot, and I think that's great. He also has a fantastic 2 chapters called How to Spot Bad Science, and these should be required reading for everyone on the planet. I mean, when you read the the health section of the New York Times or whatever, it contradicts itself every 6 months. Saturated fat is good. Saturated fat is bad. Sugar is good. Sugar is bad. And the reason for that is just because the journalists have no idea how to read a scientific study. And Tim goes through and gives you sort of like a handful, like 6 rules or 5 rules, something like that, of how to know how much you should believe about the studies that are published. So that's really awesome, and I think he did a really, really good job on that. So that's basically it. So if you're just tuning in, we were just discussing the 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss, and so I'll start taking questions now from the audience. So anything you have that came up, I am happy to answer. So I'm going to start by going over. Wait, actually, before I do that, I'm going to talk about some of the questions I got by email. actually. So I got some really good ones. So thank you guys for sending them in. And I got these from some subscribers that signed up earlier in the week. So the first one is from Monica Reinagel, and she's the nutrition diva. If you don't know who she is, she has an amazing nutrition podcast. My favorite nutrition podcast. It's called Quick and Dirty Tips. So if you go to nutritiondiva.quickanddirtytips.com, you can find her podcast there. It's amazing. She also has a great blog. It's called nutritionovereasy.com, and she has a new book coming out, Nutrition Secrets for a Healthy Diet. Anyway, she asked me if I saw any data about Tim's claim that 30 grams of protein in the morning improves metabolism by 20% throughout the day. So he has so on page 90 of the book, if you turn to that, he has a sort of a long explanation of why his breakfast is good for metabolism. He cites a couple studies, but he doesn't give the actual citation. He just describes a couple studies. Like he describes one where they did a study on women where they replaced their breakfast with eggs versus isocaloric bagel or whatever, and that the women that had the egg breakfast lost more weight. I don't see what that had to do with timing. I got the impression for sure by the time I read the entire book that this data came from experience. He has a chart in the back of the book of I think 200 people who have done the slow-carb diet and like all their data. It doesn't come out of there, oddly. Like the people who ate breakfast didn't lose that much more weight than the people who didn't. But but he does talk about how he got a lot of people to get through their plateaus by eating more protein and eating earlier in the day. So so that's the answer. Like I couldn't find a specific scientific reference. I got the impression that it was a mixture of some scientific studies that he felt supported his observations in his own friends and family and slow carb dieters. So thank you, Monica, for the question. You're awesome. Okay. My next question is from Tom in the UK. So Tom wanted to know that if I were to do the diet, what would be the typical meals that I would have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? So breakfast is easy. I always try to make breakfast fairly simple, but I like Tim's breakfast. Tim's favorite breakfast was eggs, spinach, and lentils. I think that's great. And I kind of eat. That's a little more involved than I usually do breakfast, but if I was doing the diet, I think I would try to do that. Another thing he mentions a couple times is eggs with salsa or eggs with kimchi. I eat both of those all the time. Love them. So that's what I would do. For lunch, I like to do usually salads for lunch. I'm a salad lunch fiend. And I usually I would just do a salad with some sort of fish or beans or eggs. Or the same thing, like if it's cold out, a stir fry would be similar, like just a vegetable stir fry with beans, eggs, or fish. And then for dinner, I would probably eat that. Dinner's usually when I eat my meat, any kind of meat that I eat, and then with beans and veggies. Sometimes frequently I don't eat meat at night, just because if I eat too much, I start feeling sick. So I might not eat meat every night, but if I didn't, I'd probably try to throw some eggs in there to get the protein that he wanted. But if I eat as much protein as these guys recommend, I don't feel right. So, but that's just me. Most people love it, so that is what I would do. And Tom also wanted to know what I think about cheat days, and if I think it's right to eat total crap, or should I just eat the healthy foods that don't fit into slow carb. So I talked about this a little bit already, but just to be more explicit, yeah, if I were doing it, I definitely would have a lot of trouble binging, and I would eat fruit and grains on the Saturday or whatever day, and maybe some Bi-Rite ice cream. But like industrial junk food is not something that I would ever eat. Thank you, Tom. The next question I got via email was from Bob. He wanted to know, and this is not entirely about the book, but I think it's an interesting point for people who are going to be trying the diet. What are my thoughts on pressure cooking, and specifically for meats and legumes? And people have asked me this before. Does it destroy the nutrition of the food? So with beans and meats, you're generally going to be eating those for protein, for minerals, and for fiber in the for beans, not in meat. And those are pretty stable in heat. Heat can definitely damage, antioxidant type vitamins like vitamin C and sort of the long chain carotenes and all that stuff. But, that's not what you're getting with meat and legumes. You're not eating those for vitamin C. So, don't worry about the pressure cooker. I love the pressure cooker. Pressure cooker is how I cook beans. They normally take a long time to cook if you're using fresh, dried beans like I do. But in a pressure cooker, it takes like 20 minutes and bam, you've got a delicious pot of beans. And I just make a huge batch and it lasts me all week. So I'm a big fan of the pressure cooker. Love, love, love it. I do have a brand I recommend. I'll add it to the show notes later. I forgot to do that. And then he also wanted to know about fruit again. And Tim is very explicit about this. You're not allowed to eat fruit 6 days a week. None. So if you want to do the slow-carb diet, that's your fate. And then finally, I got a question from Alex. And this is a really interesting question, actually. He says the book talks about Brazil nuts as a source of selenium. And I've heard that freshly shelled Brazil nuts, when you do it yourself as you eat them, contain a lot more selenium than even raw, unsalted ones that come pre-shelled. I've also noticed a distinct difference in the color and taste of one type or the other. Is there any truth to this? And if so, how significant? I did a little digging around in the research, and it turns out that, Alex, you are right, that Brazil nuts without the shells have about a quarter of the content of the selenium that ones with the shells have. And so that's a pretty big difference. So that actually could have a really big impact in dose. So I think if you're going to mess around with this stuff, you should get your selenium levels tested first, as Tim suggests in the book, and then go from there. Another thing to consider is that there's a much higher content of selenium in nuts from eastern Brazil than from western Brazil. And it depends a lot on how much selenium is in the soil. So that's it. So now I will turn over to some text questions and hopefully some calling questions if you guys want to call and chat with me. So, all right, first question here from Danny. How important is grass-fed meat? It's hard for me to afford grass-fed, but Rob Wolf, who swears by it. So Rob Wolf is the sort of the paleo diet guru. Yeah, I think I agree with Rob Wolf on this. Feedlot beef is really bad. If you can get, okay, so grass-fed beef, I mean, it's going to have an entirely different nutrition profile, for starters. It's going to have it's going to be leaner, it's going to have more omega-3 fatty acids. I think it has even more vitamins and stuff. But more importantly, it's going to not have the hormones and the high likelihood of contamination of E. coli and stuff. I have trouble affording grass-fed beef too, and for me, what that means is I can't eat that much of it. I eat it when I can, and otherwise I rely on sort of less expensive protein sources. Like I really love sardines, canned sardines, and smoked mackerel. Canned smoked mackerel's awesome. And yeah, I mean, the reality is really high quality meat is hard to eat a lot of unless you're pretty rich. So, my recommendation to people is to choose healthier foods that you can afford. So great question. Thanks for that. Let's see here. So, thanks, Nathan. So Tim wasn't fat, was he? How can this book benefit someone with a good body fat percentage? That's a really good question. So Tim wasn't fat, but he had a goal of, he wanted, I think he has a hobby of bodybuilding, and I think he wanted to get all cut. So, it's difficult to lose fat and not lose muscle while you're training. And so I think this diet was optimized for someone like him, somebody who already had a decent body fat percentage but wanted to get down to 10%. And then I noticed that he tried it out on his dad, who was very overweight at some point, and his dad responded just super well to it, and he documents how he went through it with his dad. His dad was his first client. Yeah, but he also has a chapter in there about what to do if you want to go from if you want to go below 10% body fat, which is super low. And this is I wouldn't recommend this for anyone unless they wanted to they're competing for something, bodybuilding or whatever. But there's extensive details on how to do that, and it includes supplements and drugs and stuff, and includes crazy things like ice baths. Excuse me. So, but it Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I guess I would say that if you already have a decent body fat percentage and you aren't trying to lose weight, I wouldn't do this. It's not necessarily health promoting. I mean, not to toot my own horn or anything, but the advice on my site is going to give you a lot, more round, healthy, sustainable diet for the long term, and it'll keep you from getting fat as well. So, great question. Great question. Thanks a lot. All right. So, Christine, I'm not a science person, but what's the underlying reason behind eating breakfast within 30 minutes? So that's what Monica asked as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I couldn't find anything on it. I think Monica's actually going to be doing her own show soon about breakfast eating, so maybe she'll figure that out for us and then let us know. Oh, it looks like we have a video question, so let's take that. Cool. I think. Oh wait, actually, let's hold off on that just to make sure it gets screened by the people that do these things for me that are nice. Okay. So next question: is ketosis honestly good or bad? So those of you who don't know what ketosis is, it is the state of using fat for energy instead of glucose for energy when you go on an extremely low-carb diet. I haven't seen any data that it's really bad. Unless you have the disease that causes ketosis, which most people don't. So I haven't seen any data that it's really bad, but it seems really freakishly unnatural to me, and it scares me a little bit. Just because we don't have data that it's really bad doesn't mean it isn't. But so far I haven't seen anything that suggests that it's really gonna do any permanent damage. So that's my answer. It's kind of wussy, but I don't think the science really understands it to the level people are, it's never been induced in people intentionally before like people are doing now. So I think it'll be a while before we have data on that, the long-term health benefits or dangers of that. Great question. Can we get our cocktail on during Tim's diet? Great question. Unfortunately, only on Saturdays. So he does talk about alcohol. He says the only thing he recommends is 1 or 2 glasses of red wine. He actually nixes white wine, which he says that it's because he found better fat loss results when he didn't have white wine. So, not if you want to lose fat, apparently. All right, let me see if this... Yeah, so we have this video call we're going to take from Bob Brown. So, welcome, Bob.
Hey.
Hi.
So my question was, as a college student on this low-carb diet, how do you balance being on the slow-carb or even a healthy lifestyle choice? How do you work that in a fast-paced environment? Cooking is difficult and sometimes tedious, and I've seen amazing recipes on your site, but what are your suggestions for a fast-paced or college student lifestyle?
Great question. So as you may or may not know, I've been in college most of my life, 12 years and counting. Actually, not counting anymore. Yeah. But so Tim's suggestion was actually a pretty good one. I liked his suggestion of relying a lot on Mexican food. I'm always eating a lot of Mexican food because my heritage is part Mexican. But you can get beans, vegetables, and meats from Mexican food places pretty easily. Also, like he suggests in the book as well, Thai places, salads. I always carry around nuts as well, like a little bag of almonds, or if you're interested in the selenium and Brazil nut question. And also just sort of having quick go-to things in your fridge that you can eat, that you can cook up in like less than 5 minutes. So if you're going out, you won't be stranded. So eggs are a great thing to have if you have hard-boiled eggs in your fridge, or even it takes 2 seconds to fry an egg or scramble an egg or whatever. It's a great choice. Same thing with, I guess I mean, even beans. Like sometimes I have a big pot of beans in my fridge, and I'll just throw them, a couple scoops in a bowl with a little bit of olive oil, a little salt and pepper, maybe some parsley or cilantro. If you have tomatoes or avocado or something, you can throw that in there. It's surprisingly filling. I mean, that'll get you through hours. You'll have a fantastic workout if you do that. Yeah, so basically you need to just sort of find things that work for you that are easy, and those need to be your default. So you aren't stuck in a position where you have nothing to eat and you wouldn't even know what to do, and so you're sort of forced to go into this sort of like awkward position where you don't know what you can eat. So did I answer your question?
Gotcha. Perfect. Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for calling. Okay, so we have time for a few more questions here. I'll try to get through these. Let's see. I live where there is a farmer's market season. What would you suggest for when the season's over? That's a really good question, and people ask it a lot. It's tough. If you have Whole Foods or other market where you can get fresh produce, it's better than nothing. I would recommend focusing on produce that's sort of in the region you're from, even if it's not exactly local. For example, if you live in Wisconsin, this time of year, there's no oranges growing in Wisconsin, but Florida oranges are pretty good. And you don't have to be totally strict and totally picky about local and organic. Just try to get as many vegetables as you can. And, if you have to resort to frozen vegetables sometimes, they're not that bad. Frozen's better than canned. The important thing is that you're just doing your best to get as many as you can. I mean, at almost any grocery store year-round, you can find kale, you can find cauliflower, you can find broccoli, you can find, it's sort of a handful of the staple foods. You can almost always find spinach. Just eat that stuff. You'll survive. Great question. All right. Oh, somebody asked about the sleeping questions. I haven't used those yet, so I'll let you know after I read them or after I try them. Okay. I am. Let's see. So here's an interesting question. How many types of beans do I make in a week? Just one. It depends on how many people I'm feeding. So one or two. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, I mean, I guess I usually do one or two. Usually one, actually. It's just easier to just make a big batch. I make a big batch of chickpeas. And what I'll do is I'll throw it in stir fries. I'll throw it in salads. I like beans that sort of keep their shape really well so that they can hold up in something like a stir fry. But you can make more. I mean, one of the examples in the book is a guy who would make sort of like a bean medley and just sort of use it in a lot of different meals. He was in the vegetarian section. So, and I was reading it and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good actually. But no need to be strict about it. So what are my thoughts on eat until full, no snacks? I've heard the opposite. Great question. I too have heard the opposite and I don't buy it. I haven't seen any data suggesting that like spreading out your meals over the day is better for you. So eating until you're full isn't the same as eating until you're stuffed. Aiming at like 80% full is pretty good. One thing, this is a really interesting point that was brought up in the book that I loved. One thing that was really interesting was Tim, because he's crazy, had a glucose monitor installed in his body. And so he was doing all these experiments where he would just eat and see how it affected his glucose, because he had heard all these things, that lemon juice reduces glucose response or insulin response and all this stuff. And what was really interesting, that one of the things he found was that even if he was eating just meat and vegetables, something that you would think wouldn't have much of a glycemic impact at all, he would sometimes get insulin spikes, really high ones, if he ate it really fast, or if he ate just a ton. So, I think this is a really interesting point because, it just shows that mindful eating could potentially be very, very beneficial for people that are trying to cut back on how much they eat and actually lose weight. So, I'm really interested in this topic. I'm going to be doing a lot more research on it myself. But basically, eat mindfully until you're full. Don't stuff yourself. And I agree. I think snacking is just a slippery slope. And I try not to do it. I usually have one medium-sized snack during the day, but I try to avoid things that, like he calls his domino foods, where you can just keep eating nuts or whatever. Like, I carry nuts with me for emergencies, and I just eat like a little pack. But if I'm having a snack during the day, I want it to be almost like a meal. It's isolated, and you sit down, and when you're done, you're done, because you can just overeat really easily that way. So we got to start winding this up. Thanks for your questions, everyone. Let's see. Okay, so this other question was the exact same question. Let me see if there's any more over here. Okay. Take a couple more. So do we really have to eat significantly more protein to sustain minimal exercises every day? I don't know. I don't think you need to eat that much protein. I don't know what to sustain minimal exercising. I guess so. You're cuttable. I'm not exactly sure what your question is, but I think if you're talking about building muscle, I don't know how much protein you normally eat. Most people do well eating a lot of protein, but I would just recommend trying for yourself. Do a week of or a week or two of a certain amount of protein. With your meals, and then double it the next week and see how you feel. Or if you can't double it, maybe increase it by 30% or something, or 50%, and just see how that works out for you. Because in my experience with stuff like this, everybody's really different. So you just need to sort of work it out for yourself. I don't understand. Christine, I don't understand your question. Sorry. Oh, this is an interesting question. Is slow carb bad if you have 200 plus pounds to lose? I don't think so. Like I said, I would generally, avoid the junk food parts. But if you need that, if that makes you able to stick to the diet, especially if you're only doing it the once a week, maybe maybe your goal should be to cut out the junk food. But, if you're eating a ton of it right now, cutting back substantially is a huge improvement. Like, I hope I didn't give that impression to anyone, that, any cutting back is a big improvement. But no, I think it could be good for you if you have 200 pounds to lose. You got to try it. You got to try something, because that's a lot. That's a lot of overweight. Good question. So I think it's actually time to wrap up. So thank you guys for joining us. This was awesome. Those were great questions, and I'm sorry I couldn't answer more of them. I'll scroll through here, and if and there's any that I think are really, really pertinent, I'll actually reply or add them to either the show notes, or maybe I'll send them out to the subscriber list. I'll probably do that. So thank you guys. If you want to watch the next show, it'll be in about 2 weeks. I don't have a date yet, and I don't have a topic yet. But if you want to watch it, please subscribe and tell me what you'd like me to talk about, because I will do that. So tinyletter.com/summertomato is how you subscribe. It's $4 a month, $1 a week. If it's too much for you, this will be released on iTunes at some point. It'll be a podcast that's just available for free. But if you want to send in your questions and talk to me and hang out and be my friend, which is fun, it'd be awesome if you subscribed. And I also wanted to thank once again Foodsy. Thank you for sponsoring, and for Zursun organic beans. Or heirloom beans. These are both amazing companies. I adore them, and I think you guys will too. And make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, that's it. So the recording of this will be available soon at summertomato.com and also on iTunes. And thank you so much for tuning in.